Well, there you have it. A very interesting statement from the President of the United States on Iran's Tomahawk missiles. Just as an aside, sorry I couldn't get the audio on that. My editing skills are not yet up to spec, but I've probably done us all a favour by not including that man's droning voice. But the point that I want to make here, and something that's important to point out, is Donald Trump just said that Iran has Tomahawk missiles. They don't. They never have. America has never sold Tomahawk missiles to Iran. They do not possess them. That man knows it, and his Secretary of War, Action Man Hegseth, has backed him up on it. Ladies and gentlemen, those men have blatantly just lied to you. Now, you're probably rolling your eyes and going, you're not the first time, Bintang. But the truth is, if we had functioning democracies like we claim to have, then the people we elect and put in power, and remember that man has the codes to nuclear weapons, if they were found to be deliberately lying to us, knowingly telling lies, they would be removed from office immediately if our institutions functioned as they should. And there you have a situation where the President of the United States and his Secretary for War blatantly lied to us. And sadly, people are too stupid to question the fact that he is trying to tell us that Iran used a missile it does not possess to attack one of its own schools and murder a whole lot of innocent young school children. And no one's questioning that. I'm Bintang Burney, and this is Friday News. Episode 3, and welcome to the program. I wish, as always, we had more uplifting things to talk about. It's kind of always depressing that the news is never good. But there you have a situation where we're being told that Iran is now blowing up its own school children because, hey, it's a repressive regime. Once I was asked, Bintang, what do you think is the most dangerous threat in the world today? And people who know me would be assuming I would say something like, Israel, the US-Israeli alliance, America and its meddling in other countries. And mark my words, they are very dangerous. But my answer might surprise a lot of people. I think the most dangerous thing that happens in the world today is the lack of credible evidentiary information. We are living in an era where propaganda has spread like never before. We live in an era where we are continually lied to. I mean, it is Orwellian. I mean, even in my own country now, those Zionist bastards have instituted thought crimes. You can be arrested for saying the wrong thing. Who would have thought that the world would ever get to a stage like this? And yet it has. And again, we're manipulated and we're lied to. I mean, some of the other things, I'll use Donald Trump as an example, but mark my words, people often talk about Trump and how dangerous Trump is. No. This is how dangerous America is, because Trump is just the spokesman. He's the front guy. Who's really pulling the strings behind the scenes is that bastard Benjamin Netanyahu. This is Israel's war. Make no mistake about that. America is just the compliant tool being used to do what the Israelis have wanted to do for decades. And what Netanyahu has said is his stated objective goal of destroying Iran. He's made no secret of that. All his political career, that's all he's talked about. But we're living in an era where people don't realize this because the truth is never told. You can find the truth if you go to alternate media sources. And I would strongly recommend anyone who listens to this program, both of you, but seriously, you should look at people like Michael West Media, a Kangaroo Court in Australia. Internationally, I would look at many of the things like Daniel Davis Deep Dive, Doug McGregor, Scott Ritter, Danny Haifong. These are people, Consortium News, The Grey Zone. That's where you'll find out what's going on in the world, because these are the last bastions of real journalism. What you see on your television and you read in your newspaper is not journalism, it's propaganda. It is people blurting out information that's been given to them by the likes of the US military, hardly a reliable source. Look what's happening in this conflict in the Middle East. I won't call it a war because war hasn't been declared. I still like calling it a special military operation, just to annoy the Americans, because they hated the Russians using that term. But as an aside, the Russians do have a special military operation ongoing because they started with very specific and very limited aims. Once again, you were continually lied to. My point again, that this was, the phrase kept being repeated, Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Russia has never conducted a full-scale invasion of Ukraine. And as I said at the time, years ago, if they did, Ukraine would have been a smouldering wreck in 3 weeks. Apparently I got it wrong. The State Department told Zelensky he had 4 weeks to get out. But Russia went into that conflict with very specific, clearly defined aims from the very beginning. Their aim was to remove the Ukrainian military from the Donbass, an area which they consider, with some very good justification, to be part of Russia, certainly ethnically Russian, and to remove the Ukrainian military, who were actually conducting what was really amounting to ethnic cleansing. But they had very clear and precise aims. And once they have secured the Donbass, they will stop, despite what those lying bastards in Europe keep telling you about hordes of them going through and up to the English Channel. The imbeciles in the United Kingdom saying we have to prepare for war with Russia. Good luck, boys. But that's my point. That is and remains a special military operation with clearly defined goals and a clearly defined objective and an end game. Unlike this conflict in the Middle East, which is just a rambling series of lies initiated by Israel. And as we now know, as I mentioned in my last program, the real reason has come out that the Israelis were going to attack Iran because they knew they had a president who was weak enough to allow them to do it, whereas previous United States presidents had put a lid on this sort of ridiculous adventurism. And as a result, America was dragged into a war that it really didn't start and, by all accounts, really didn't want. Then we get the continual lies, and that's what I'm talking about today. Trump said that Iran was going to take over the Gulf. They were going to take over the Gulf. Iran has never expanded beyond its borders, unlike America, which continually intervenes militarily in other countries. And yes, Iran may have links with the Houthis and may have links with Hezbollah, but all regional powers have links with people around them who have similar ideals and similar objectives. And if we're honest, the Houthis, Hezbollah and Iran have only ever had to respond to Israeli aggression. Israel, as I've always said, Israel is the problem in the Middle East, not Iran, not Iraq, it wasn't Libya, and it certainly wasn't Syria until we made it a problem. We made those countries a problem at the behest of Israel and, as I've said, the most evil man to walk the planet since Adolf Hitler, Benjamin Netanyahu. Now, you're being lied to and you're being censored as well. I don't know if many people would be aware, but recently the United States has imposed a 14-day moratorium on satellite imagery coming out of the Gulf. So basically, you have to ask yourself, if we're doing so great in this war, Donnie and Pete and all these people who tell us, we're winning. And when you look at it, it's the language of children. We're going to hit them 20 times harder. We're going to get them very big. It sounds like you're listening to a 10-year-old boy in the playground talking about what he's going to do to somebody who stole his lunch money. It is so immature and so childish, and it is without reason or definition. Now, the United States is basically stopping imagery coming out, satellite imagery coming out of the Gulf, and saying it has to wait 14 days. Now, why? If we are the free and democratic ones, why are we suppressing information? And anyone who knows anything about Israel, Israel has the most strict military censorship in the world. It's I always laugh that we talk about countries like Iran as repressive and they hurt their own people. Well, what did Israel just do in Gaza to the Palestinians? Apart from stealing Palestine and continually encroaching upon its neighbours, all of which is illegal, all of which flies in the face of the multiple UN resolutions which have been raised and passed against Israel, the biggest rogue state in the Middle East. Some refer to it in the Middle East as the colony. And you know what? That's a very accurate assessment. But Israel bombed and slaughtered. The official figure is around 70,000. Mark my words, I think it's about double that by the time you start digging up under the rubble of all the buildings that collapsed on innocent people. The world did nothing. No one saw that as repressive. In fact, Israel framed it as defense. Now, on the other hand, when you have Iran, which truly is defending itself when it was attacked without reason in the middle of peace negotiations, which were progressing, according to the guy running the negotiations, they were making massive progress. A deal was close to being reached. Of course, Netanyahu couldn't allow that to happen, could he? So we attacked them. And as Scott Ritter rightly points out, that technically is a war crime. We have a situation where Israel is actively censoring everything coming out of there. The United States is lying to you. I saw Hegseth, once again, Mr. Action Man, talking about how the strikes are going down. The strikes are going down. Well, it's interesting. What's also been announced lately, but of course you never see this on the mainstream media. You've got to go looking for this because the news media doesn't want to tell you the truth. They want to just keep perpetuating the lies that they're instructed to push forth to you. Brigadier General Moussani, he's the head of the Iranian aerospace forces. Now, once again, we're told that all these people were decapitated, we wiped them all out, and that's, in that illegal strike. But yet they still have a brigadier general in charge of their aerospace forces. So that tells me that command and control is going pretty well in Iran. He recently announced that we're going into a new phase of the war, and this is a heavier phase where the minimum payload which will be sent by missiles into Israel, or anywhere else for that matter, will be 1 ton. Ladies and gentlemen, a 1-ton missile slamming into the ground at high speed does an enormous amount of damage. And mark my words, Israel is being pummeled into the ground. Israel is being systematically destroyed, and you're not being allowed to see it because the Israelis are censoring it all so that they can continue with their American partners in crime to lie to you, to tell you that this war is going well and Iran is on its knees. Israel is on its knees. Israel is suffering, and Israel will continue to suffer. Interesting news out today, there's a rumour floating around that Benjamin Netanyahu's brother has been killed. Smotrich apparently is in big trouble. The Iranians are not only fighting back, they're actually starting to do what we, the collective West, well, at least the Americans and the Israelis, with our support, said we'd done, decapitation strikes, because it looks like the Israeli leaders and government are starting to suffer. And if you remember in my last episode, I talked about the objectives of this war being regime change, and I said it very may just well work. The only thing is that it won't be the regime in Iraq that has changed. It's going to be the regime in Israel, in America, in countries in the Middle East. They're the ones that might be looking at serious regime change as a result of this farcical excursion. So you need to understand that everything you're being told to, it's sad to have to say this, but everything you're being told is a lie. You are not being treated to the truth. And time will pass, and this will come out. The damage that's being done to Israel will start to become apparent. And as always, the big question being asked is, unlike Russia's special military operation, which is get up to the Donbass, destroy the Ukrainian military in the Donbass, which they are very effectively doing, and basically destroying Ukraine. But they'll stop once they get to the Donbass. They've said, we're going to achieve our objectives. If we can't achieve them at the negotiating table, because Zelensky won't come to the party, then we'll achieve them militarily. And they will, and they are. But they have an end game. That's it. Mark my words. The Russian army is not going to take over all of Ukraine. They don't want it. They don't need it. They can't manage it. Once they secure the Donbass, and possibly a buffer zone around that, because the Ukrainians keep firing the missiles that we keep paying for and sending them, they're going to stop. What's going to happen in the Middle East? You've got, as I said, Donald Trump, who not only speaks like a child, he has the mentality of a child. The American leadership, once again, as I mentioned last episode, the American government is completely infested with Zionists and Zionism. So Israel is basically the tail that's wagging the dog here. But the question begs, at what point is this going to end? The global economy is suffering, and it's suffering already, and it's going to continue to suffer, and it's going to continue to suffer bad. If you think oil prices are big now, wait and see. If this goes on, if the Iranians keep the Strait of Hormuz closed for another 2 or 3 weeks, man, you're going to see oil prices like you've never ever seen before. And it's going to start hurting people at home, because everything runs on oil. The ships that bring you goods and services from overseas all use oil. Pharmaceuticals use oil. Okay, oil is used, and plastic industry is a petroleum-based industry. Okay, you can't manufacture plastic without oil. So this has far-reaching consequences, as I've said, more than just how much it's going to cost to fill up your car. But the question is, what's the off-ramp? At what point do we stop? Now, when it comes to a slugfest between America and Israel and Iran, my money's on Iran. I think they'll hold out longer than Israel. They're a much bigger country. Iran's the size of Western Europe, for Christ's sakes. 93 odd million people against less than 10 million people in Israel. And the people in Israel are highly concentrated in dense cities. So the impact of the war is going to be felt much more keenly in Israel than it is in Iran. And Iran's suffering, don't get me wrong. We're doing a lot of damage. But there's only one way this is going to end if it keeps going. And that's Israel is going to be basically wiped off the map, which, as I said last episode, is an extreme danger because of their predilection to use the Samson option and their stated policy of, if we go down, we're taking everyone else with us. Dangerous, dangerous fuckers. We really need to be careful. One of the worst things about Israel is if it wins, it's always a disaster. If it loses, it could be even worse. But we need to look at what the way out is, rather than continuing to escalate this. And of course, my disgustingly weak Zionist-controlled government in Australia has just agreed to send, apparently we're sending a wedge-tail, highly sophisticated, Australia's got some very high-tech stuff, a highly sophisticated aircraft, basically an AWACS, an airborne warning and surveillance aircraft that can, because you know why we're sending that specific military asset and not F-35 fighters, which we have, because Iran has knocked out all of America's radar bases in the Middle East. We have effectively blinded the United States and Israel. Because make no mistake, all of these huge radar installations costing billions of dollars were put there not to protect the Gulf states. They were put there to protect Israel. That's what these were all about. And the Iranians have knocked them all out. The Iranians who are losing and being battered, we're going to get them. So the question begs, well, how come they're so effective if they're, getting smashed? So that's why we're sending that particular asset, because the eyes and ears of the United States have been deafened and blinded by the Iranian attacks. And of course, our kowtowing government, which every time America says jump, we ask how high, the same government, mind you, that our wonderful foreign minister, Penny Israel is Never Wong, said we couldn't intervene in Gaza because it's a long way away and it's complex, and we're just a middle power. We can't project power. Well, all of a sudden, we're able to project power to the Middle East, okay? We're able to project power to Iraq. We're able to project power to Afghanistan. And Australian aircraft actually bombed Syria when Assad was still in power, technically an act of war, but we'll ignore all of that. But we couldn't help Gaza because it's too far away, you know. And here we are now. Apparently we're sending this aircraft to protect the United Arab Emirates. This may sound harsh, but fuck the UAE. If they're going to allow missile strikes from American missiles and American aircraft to launch and attack another sovereign nation, whether it be Iran or anyone else, well then, they deserve to get hit back. Here's the analogy for my Australian audience. You might try to connect the dots. Imagine if China used bases in Indonesia to bomb Darwin. Do you think that we would turn around and go, well, we can't retaliate because Indonesia's not at war with us. It's the Chinese aircraft taken off from Indonesia that are bombing us. Man, we'd be trying to blow the shit out of every Indonesian airbase within 1,000 miles. That's the analogy. And I'm not saying that's going to happen, by the way. I'm in Indonesia. Indonesia and Australia seem to be getting on just fine, and the Indonesian people are lovely, as are the Chinese people, by the way, and benign and not a threat to anyone. But that's the analogy, is that these Gulf states are allowing a foreign power to attack one of their neighbours, bomb its cities, kill its civilians, and somehow we feel obligated to protect them. No, UAE, if you don't want to be hit by Iran, if you want protection from Iranian missile strikes, well, stop allowing American forces to use your territory to bomb and kill people in your neighbouring countries. It's pretty simple. But no, instead, kowtowing Australian government's going to go over there, put specialists in there, put our servicemen and women at risk. Once again, all of this on behalf of Israel. Make no mistake, we are all now fighting Israel's war. And the big question is, at what point is Israel going to realise that it can't continue? Because its supplies are limited. The Haifa refinery was blown up, once again, in response to Israel attacking an Iranian oil refinery. See, everything Iran does is in response to Israeli aggression. You'll never hear that in the news. You'll never see that in the papers. And that is why these horrific wars, which cost billions upon billions of dollars, we're chewing through huge money. If you want to be just, you take the human element out of it, take the humanity away, this is just, from a sheer monetary standpoint, it's a disaster. You know, we never have enough money to build schools and hospitals, but when it comes to war, open checkbook, isn't it? So, you know, and the Israelis, you've got to ask, at what point will they give up? They were whinging. A strike went off near one of their hospitals, smashed a few windows, and they were carrying on about how inhuman it was. Very interesting, coming from a country which bombed 36 hospitals in Gaza. Okay, another fact that you don't see in the media. See, these war crimes that we, the collective West, perpetrate time and time again are just ignored. We talk about rules and the rules-based order, and yet here we are, we've attacked a sovereign nation with no justification whatsoever. We're supporting a nation which has just committed a genocide. The United Nations words, not mine. The UN has said that what Israel did in Gaza amounts to genocide. We all know it was ethnic cleansing on a massive scale. Yet, you never see any of that. The war crimes are hidden, the lies keep going, the propaganda is there, and oh God, it's Friday night footy, and who's going to be on maths this week? And nobody cares. Sadly, I don't know how this is going to end. It is clear that Iran is entering a new phase. Don't take in any of the lies that prick action man Hegseth is telling you about how Iranian missile strikes are down, how we're winning, how we're destroying their facilities. This is now getting into a worse stage. What's happening now is Israel is getting hammered because they've used up most of their defensive assets on an early week of the war, when Iran was just firing its drones and its older missiles, soaking up all those air defense missiles. And even then, if you saw the actual footage, not the footage you see on TV of Patriot missiles going up, they're going up. They're not fucking hitting anything, I can tell you. What's happening is Israel has been getting hammered. its defense facilities are getting destroyed, and now its defenses are getting weaker and weaker, and the Iranian attacks are getting stronger and stronger. The exact opposite of what the mainstream media would have you believe. Mark my words, this doesn't bode well for any of us, and I can't really see how this is going to end, what the off-ramp is going to be, because Trump's political career is on the line, as is Netanyahu's. Netanyahu might end up getting killed. Well, I shouldn't say this. I'm against killing any single person, anyone. No one should get killed. But I will say that if Netanyahu got killed in one of these airstrikes, I would be the last person to shed a tear. And that's a horrible thing to say, I know, but, well, would you mourn the death of Adolf Hitler? Put that in perspective. I don't know how this is going to end, and I think the world is in a very dangerous and unstable place, once again brought to you by Netanyahu. So maybe if a missile does end his political career, shall we say, maybe that would be an option for some successor to step in and try to extricate us all out of this horrible war, which is going to impact every single one of you. Every single one of you is going to hurt in some way or another from the actions of the rogue Israeli state and our undying obedience to Zionism. Anyway, on that cheery note, this is Bintang Burney saying, let's hope we're all here next week. And I hope, I'm against hope, that we do find some off-ramp before this expands even further. Take care, and remember, there are two types of people in this world. Avoid them both.
And if you don't like it, then leave. Or use your right to protest down the streets. Use your right, but don't imagine